August 15, 1945. Lieutenant Takeshi Yamamoto stood in the ruins of what used to be Atsugi Air Base, staring at the American soldier who had just offered him something in a strange glass bottle. For 3 years, Takeshi had been told that Americans were demons who would torture him, burn his family, and destroy everything sacred about Japan. But this demon was smiling, and the bottle in his hand was sweating with cold condensation in the August heat. Takeshi's hand trembled as he reached for it. Not from fear, from confusion, because nothing about this moment made sense. Let me take you back 6 months earlier, to a cockpit 30,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean, where Takeshi's understanding of the world was about to begin its slow collapse. February 1945. Takeshi was flying his Mitsubishi A6M0 over the Philippine Sea when his engine took a hit from American anti-aircraft fire. The plane shuddered. Black smoke poured from the cowling. He had maybe 2 minutes before the whole thing came apart. The ocean below looked like hammered steel, gray and merciless. His training officer's voice echoed in his head. "If you are captured, the Americans will do things to you that death would be a mercy to avoid." He reached for the pistol at his hip, the honorable way out. But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was the photograph of his little sister Akiko tucked into his flight suit, the one where she was 7 years old, holding a rice ball she'd made for him, her gap-toothed smile wider than her face. Maybe it was the way the morning light hit the water just then, golden and impossibly beautiful. Or maybe it was just the human body's stubborn refusal to stop existing. He ditched the zero in the water instead. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. Salt water flooded the cockpit. His fingers fumbled with the harness release, and for a terrible moment he thought he'd drowned right there, strapped into his own plane like a grave. Then the buckle gave way, and he kicked upward, gasping, breaking the surface just as the zero slipped beneath the waves forever. He floated there for 6 hours before the American patrol boat found him. When the sailors pulled him aboard, Takeshi closed his eyes and waited for the torture to begin. Instead, someone wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. Someone else pressed a canteen to his lips. The water tasted like metal and life. A young sailor, couldn't have been more than 19, with red hair and freckles like scattered rust, looked at him with something Takeshi couldn't identify at first. It took him a moment to realize it was concern. "You okay, buddy?" the sailor asked, even though Takeshi couldn't understand the words. They took him to a POW camp on a small island whose name he never learned. The camp wasn't what he expected. No torture chambers, no screaming, just rows of tents, a mess hall, and guards who looked more bored than brutal. The other Japanese prisoners kept to themselves, some still believing that rescue was coming, that the emperor would never surrender, that their suffering had divine purpose. Takeshi wasn't so sure anymore. The guards rotated every few weeks, but there was one who came back regularly, a staff sergeant from somewhere called Nebraska, which Takeshi learned was very flat and grew a lot of corn. His name was Bill Henderson, and he had a habit of sitting outside Takeshi's tent in the evening, smoking cigarettes and talking about absolutely nothing important. Corn gets about yay high by July. You ever seen a cornfield? No? Well, it's something. Goes on forever. You get lost in there as a kid, you might not come out till dinner. Takeshi understood maybe 1 word in 10, but he listened anyway. There was something comforting about Bill's voice, the way it rose and fell like a familiar song. Sometimes Bill would pull out a photograph of his own family, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, 2 little boys with Bill's same square jaw. That's Dorothy, and that's Bill Jr. and Tommy. Tommy's the troublemaker, takes after his old man.
One evening in April, Bill brought something different. He pulled out a worn paperback book and opened it to a dog-eared page. "You might not understand this," he said, "but I'm going to read it anyway because I think you'd like it." It was poetry. Takeshi recognized the rhythm of it even through the foreign words. Bill read slowly, his voice soft. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate." When he finished, he looked up at Takeshi. "Shakespeare," he said. "English guy, died long time ago. But some things, they stick around because they're true." Takeshi found himself nodding, even though he wasn't entirely sure what he was agreeing with. The news of Germany's surrender reached the camp in May. Then came the whispers about something called an atomic bomb, though none of the prisoners really understood what that meant. The world was changing in ways that felt both impossibly fast and terribly slow. In June, Bill stopped coming by. Takeshi asked one of the other guards, through broken gestures and the few English words he'd picked up, where Bill had gone. The guard's face went carefully neutral. "Shipped out," he said. "Okinawa." Takeshi knew what that meant. Okinawa was a meat grinder. The battle was still raging, and men were dying by the thousands. He thought about Bill reading poetry outside his tent, Bill talking about cornfields and his boys back home. He thought about how strange it was to worry about an enemy's safety. July burned past in a haze of heat and rumors. Some prisoners said Japan would never surrender. Others said the Americans would invade the home islands and it would be the end of everything. Takeshi stopped trying to guess. He just existed day after day in a strange limbo between the person he'd been and whoever he was becoming. Then came August 15th. The camp loudspeaker crackled to life at noon, an American officer's voice, speaking slowly in Japanese. "The Empire of Japan has surrendered. The war is over. You will all be processed for return to your homes." The silence that followed was enormous. Some prisoners wept. Others sat perfectly still, faces blank with shock. One man near the back of the compound began to scream, a raw animal sound that went on and on until the guards gently led him to the medical tent. Takeshi felt nothing at first. Then everything all at once. Relief, grief, shame, confusion, joy that he might see Akiko again, horror at what he might return to. That afternoon, they loaded the prisoners onto trucks for transport to a larger processing center. As Takeshi climbed into the truck bed, someone called his name. He turned. It was Bill. The sergeant looked thinner, older, with a fresh scar running from his temple to his jaw. But he was alive. He was smiling. "Takeshi, you old son of a gun," Bill said, gripping his shoulder. "You made it!" Takeshi's English was still terrible, but he managed. "You also made it?" "Yeah, well, wasn't sure I would for a while there. Okinawa was... Anyway, listen." Bill reached into his pack and pulled out a glass bottle filled with dark liquid. The glass was so cold it was fogging in the heat.
"This is Coca-Cola," Bill said. "It's from America. It's what home tastes like to me. I want you to have one." He pressed the bottle into Takeshi's hands. And that's where our story really begins. The bottle was cold, impossibly cold. Takeshi looked down at it, at the strange cursive script he couldn't read, at the amber liquid inside that seemed to glow in the afternoon sun. Around him, other prisoners were climbing into trucks. Guards were shouting instructions. The whole camp was a controlled chaos of ending and beginning. But in this moment, with Bill standing there expectant and hopeful, everything else fell away. "Go on," Bill said, making a drinking motion. "It's good, I promise." Takeshi looked at the bottle cap. He'd never seen one like it before. Bill laughed, pulled out an opener from his belt, and popped the cap off with a sharp hiss. Carbonation mist rose from the mouth of the bottle, and with it came a smell unlike anything Takeshi had encountered. Sweet, sharp, with something dark and complex underneath. He raised it to his lips and drank. The first taste hit his tongue like electricity. Sweet, yes, but not like sugar or honey or any sweetness he knew. There was citrus in there, and something else, something he couldn't name. The carbonation fizzed and popped in his mouth, almost aggressive, making him cough a little. Bill grinned wider. "Takes some getting used to, don't it?" Takeshi took another sip, then another, and with each swallow, something strange happened. He'd expected American food to taste evil somehow, because how could the food of demons be anything but bitter? His training had told him that American culture was empty, that their materialism had hollowed them out, that they had no soul. But this was just a drink. A strange drink, sure, but one made for humans, made to be enjoyed, made to be shared. The sweetness wasn't aggressive or violent. It was just sweet, simple, honest even. "We got this stuff sent from home in care packages. My Dorothy, she knows a guy who works at the bottling plant in Omaha, gets me a case every few months. I've been saving this last one for something special. Figured the end of the war qualifies." Bill opened his own bottle and held it up. "To going home," he said. Takeshi understood enough to raise his own bottle in response. They drank together, an American guard and a Japanese pilot, in the ruins of a prison camp, while the war leaked out of the world around them. "Your family," Takeshi said, working hard to form the English words. "Safe?" "Far as I know," Bill said. "Haven't had a letter in a while, but no bad news is good news, right? What about yours?" Takeshi's hand went automatically to his breast pocket, where Akiko's photograph had lived for 3 years. "Sister, Tokyo. I do not know." The thing neither of them said hung between them. Tokyo had been firebombed to ash, hundreds of thousands dead. The chances that one little girl with a gap-toothed smile had survived were small. Bill's face went soft. "Hey, Tokyo's a big place. Lots of people made it. I bet she's fine. I bet she's waiting for you right now." Takeshi wanted to believe him, so he did, just for that moment. They finished their drinks in companionable silence. When Takeshi's bottle was empty, he looked at it for a long time, turning it in his hands. Something about the experience felt important, though he couldn't say exactly why. It wasn't just the taste. It was the context, the generosity, the fact that Bill had saved his last bottle of home and chosen to share it with someone who, 6 months ago, had been trying to kill people just like him.
"Why?" Takeshi asked finally. "Why give me this?" Bill thought about it, squinting into the sun. "You know, my Tommy, my youngest, before I shipped out, he asked me if I was going to kill bad guys. And I told him, there ain't bad guys, not really. Just guys on the other side who got told the same stuff we got told about doing our duty and protecting our families. I didn't know if I believed that then. But sitting here with you?" He shrugged. "Yeah, I believe it." A whistle blew. Time to load up. "That's our cue," Bill said, standing and offering his hand to help Takeshi up. "You take care of yourself, Takeshi. You get home to that sister of yours. You hear me?" "Yes," Takeshi said. Then, with great effort, "Thank you for everything." "Oh, hell." Bill's eyes got a little bright. "Don't mention it." The truck ride to the processing center took 3 hours over bombed-out roads. Takeshi spent most of it staring at the empty Coca-Cola bottle in his hands, thinking about sweetness and sharing, about Bill's boys back in Nebraska, about Akiko
and whether she was still alive to receive the brother who was coming home changed in ways he didn't fully understand yet. The processing center was chaos. Thousands of Japanese soldiers and airmen waiting to be documented, checked for injuries, cleared for transport home. It would take weeks, they were told, maybe months. Japan's infrastructure was destroyed. Ships were scarce. Patience was required. Takeshi found himself grouped with other pilots. They slept in a large warehouse that still smelled of machine oil and cordite. At night, lying on his cot, he'd listen to the others talk. Some were still bitter, still angry, still convinced that Japan had been betrayed from within, that they could have won if only they'd fought harder, believed harder, died harder. Others were just hollowed out, empty, going through the motions of continued existence without any real investment in it. Takeshi said little, but he kept the Coca-Cola bottle tucked under his cot like a secret. One evening, about a week into their wait, a man named Kobayashi sat down next to him. Kobayashi had been a bomber pilot, shot down over Luzon, in the camp even longer than Takeshi. He was thin as wire, with eyes that had seen too much. "I hear you became friends with one of the guards," Kobayashi said. It wasn't quite an accusation, but it wasn't friendly either. "He was kind," Takeshi replied carefully. "He was the enemy." "The war's over." "Is it?" Kobayashi leaned back against the wall. "We're going home to a destroyed country, occupied by the people who bombed us into submission. The Emperor himself had to tell us to surrender. Do you know what that means? Everything we believed, everything we were told about divine protection and inevitable victory, lies, all lies. So yes, the shooting stopped, but I don't know if the war is over." Takeshi thought about the taste of Coca-Cola, the carbonation sharp and sweet on his tongue. "We have to let it be over," he said finally. "Otherwise, what was any of it for?" Kobayashi laughed, bitter as burnt rice. What was it for, anyway? That night, Takeshi couldn't sleep. He lay awake thinking about his father, who'd been so proud when Takeshi enlisted, who'd given him the family's ceremonial sword and told him to bring honor to their name. What would his father say now? What honor was there in survival when so many had died? What honor was there in drinking Coca-Cola with an American and finding it sweet? But then he thought about Akiko's photograph, about the rice ball she'd made with her own small hands, about how she'd probably be 16 now if she was alive, nearly grown. Wouldn't she want her brother to come home? Wouldn't she want him to find reasons to keep living, to find sweetness where he could, to believe that people could be kind even across the impossible distances of war? He pulled out the photograph and looked at it in the dim light filtering through the warehouse windows. Akiko smiled up at him, gap-toothed and eternal. "I'm coming home," he whispered to her. "I'm going to find you. And I'm going to tell you about all the strange things I learned. About Americans who weave poetry. About drinks that taste like lightning and sugar. About how the world is bigger and stranger and maybe kinder than we were told." The photograph didn't answer, but he felt better anyway. 2 weeks later, they got their transport orders. They'd be sailing to Yokohama on a converted American cargo ship. From there, they'd be released to make their own ways home, assuming there was a home to return to. The night before departure, Takeshi packed his few possessions, a spare uniform, the photograph, and the empty Coca-Cola bottle. Kobayashi watched him pack. "Why are you keeping that?" he asked, pointing at the bottle. Takeshi picked it up, turned it in his hands. "Because it reminds me." "Of what?" "That I was wrong about some things, and that being wrong didn't kill me. It just made me different." Kobayashi was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You think we'll be able to live in the new Japan, whatever that looks like?" "I think we have to try," Takeshi said. "What else is there?" The ship departed at dawn. Takeshi stood at the rail, watching the Philippine Islands recede into the distance, watching the sun rise over the water like it was being born for the first time. Around him, other men were silent, each lost in their own thoughts of home and uncertainty and the strange, terrible relief of having survived. The voyage took 5 days. Takeshi spent most of it on deck, letting the wind scour him clean, watching the endless water and thinking about everything that had changed and everything that hadn't. He was still Japanese. He was still a pilot, even if he'd never fly again. He was still Akiko's brother, but he was also something new now, something without a name yet. Someone who'd tasted Coca-Cola and found it sweet. Someone who'd been shown kindness by the enemy and couldn't unknow that kindness. Someone who was going to have to figure out how to live in a world that had broken and reformed around him. On the 4th night, he stood at the rail and poured a few drops of seawater into the empty Coca-Cola bottle, then sealed it again with a cork he'd found. A mixture of two things that weren't supposed to mix. American glass holding Pacific water. Something about it felt right. When they finally saw the coast of Japan, many men wept. Takeshi just stared, trying to recognize the shape of home in the dark line of land on the horizon. The ship docked at Yokohama on a gray morning in late September. The port was devastated. Burned-out buildings, sunken ships listing in the harbor like dead whales, debris and rubble as far as Takeshi could see. This was victory's opposite. This was the price of losing everything. American soldiers directed them off the ship, processed their papers, gave them each a small amount of occupation scrip, and the documents stating they'd been released from prisoner of war status. A Japanese official, looking harried and exhausted, gave a brief speech about how they were expected to be model citizens in the new Japan, how they needed to look forward, not back, how reconstruction depended on everyone doing their part. Then they were released, just like that. After years of war, months of imprisonment, weeks of waiting, they were simply free. The transition was so abrupt, it felt violent. Takeshi stood in the ruins of the port with his small bag of possessions and no idea what to do next. Tokyo was roughly 20 miles away, but he had no transportation, little money, and no confirmation that his family's house still existed. He started walking.
The road to Tokyo was packed with people. Refugees returning home, families displaced by bombing, children who'd been evacuated to the countryside now coming back to find their parents. Everyone looked thin, exhausted, wearing clothes that were more patches than original fabric. Takeshi joined the stream of humanity and walked. It took him 2 days. He slept the first night in an abandoned factory with a dozen other travelers. No one talked much. What was there to say? Everything that could be said had been burned away. They shared what little food they had. Some rice balls that were more starch than rice, pickled radish that tasted like salt and survival. Takeshi contributed a can of rations from his POW release package. It wasn't much, but it was something. Tokyo, when he finally reached it, was worse than he'd imagined. Entire neighborhoods simply gone, replaced by fields of ash and twisted metal. The firebombing had been thorough, but among the devastation, life was already returning. Makeshift shelters, street vendors selling whatever they could scavenge, children playing in the rubble like it was just another landscape. Humans were resilient. Takeshi found that both comforting and deeply sad. He made his way through the wreckage to the Sumida district, where his family's house had stood. Every street corner was unrecognizable. The landmarks of his childhood had been erased. He had to navigate by the position of the river, by the faint outlines of where streets used to be. When he finally found the right location, there was nothing there. Just ash. Just empty air where his home should have been. Takeshi stood there for a long time, his bag heavy on his shoulder, the Coca-Cola bottle hard against his ribs where he'd tucked it into his jacket. He didn't cry. He was too empty for tears. He just stood there and let the wind blow the dust of his former life around his feet. Takeshi? The voice was small, uncertain, impossible. He turned. A teenage girl stood a few yards away, skinny as a shadow, her hair roughly cut, wearing a too large work coat. But her eyes. He knew those eyes. Akiko? She ran to him. He dropped his bag and caught her, and they collided like planets, holding each other while the world spun around them. She was crying. He discovered he was crying too. Great gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep in his chest, from a place that had been locked down for 3 years of war and survival. "You're alive," he kept saying. "You're alive, you're alive, you're alive." "I thought you were dead," she sobbed into his shoulder. "They said your plane went down. They said there were no survivors. I thought, I'm here now." They held each other while Tokyo's ruins looked on indifferently. Eventually, Akiko pulled back, wiping her face with her sleeve. I'm sorry. I should be strong. I shouldn't—" "No," Takeshi said firmly. "We've all been strong enough. It's okay to cry." She nodded, sniffling. Then she seemed to really see him for the first time. "You look different." "I am different." Do you have somewhere? Where are you staying?" "With Mrs. Tanaka. You remember her? 3 blocks over. Her house survived. A lot of us are staying there. It's crowded, but it's safe. Come on." She took his hand like she used to when she was little, and led him through the rubble. Mrs. Tanaka's house was a miracle, slightly damaged but standing, a wooden structure that had somehow avoided the worst of the firebombing. It sheltered maybe 15 people, all refugees from destroyed homes, all making do. Mrs. Tanaka herself was a tiny ancient woman who seemed to run on pure will and tea. When Akiko brought Takeshi in, Mrs. Tanaka looked him up and down, then nodded once. "You'll sleep in the back room. No shoes inside. We share all meals. You look like you can work. Good. Tomorrow you help clear rubble on the next block."
"Yes, ma'am," Takeshi said, and found himself almost smiling. Something about her no-nonsense attitude was deeply comforting. That night, lying on a thin mat in the back room with 5 other men, Takeshi finally let himself believe it. He'd survived. Akiko had survived. They had a place to sleep and people around them who were also rebuilding. It wasn't much, but it was something to build on. In the days that followed, Takeshi fell into a routine. Mornings were spent clearing rubble, salvaging anything useful, intact bricks, pieces of metal, unburned wood. Afternoons, he'd help Mrs. Tanaka's household with repairs and foraging for food. Evenings were for Akiko, sitting with her while she told him about the war from her perspective. The evacuations, the bombing raids, the way the whole city had burned in a single night in March. How she'd hidden in a water cistern and thought she'd drown or burn and didn't know which would be worse. "I thought about you," she said one evening. They were sitting on the remains of a wall, watching the sunset over Tokyo's ruins. "I'd remember things you taught me, like how to find north by the stars, how to tell if water's safe to drink. You probably don't remember teaching me that stuff, but I remembered." "I remember," Takeshi said quietly. "What was it like, being captured?" He thought about how to answer, how to explain that it had broken everything he thought he knew and rebuilt him into someone different, how to convey the strangeness of kindness from the enemy. Instead, he pulled out the Coca-Cola bottle. Akiko looked at it, confused. "What is that?" "It's called Coca-Cola. It's American." He told her the whole story then. Bill reading poetry outside his tent, the last bottle shared on the last day of the war, the taste that had been nothing like he expected. Akiko listened carefully. When he finished, she took the bottle from him and examined it like an artifact from another world, which in a way it was. "Is it good, the Coca-Cola?" "Yes, it's sweet. It's strange, but it's good." "I want to try it someday," she said, handing the bottle back. "You will," Takeshi promised. "Someday when things are normal again, we'll find some and we'll drink it together, and I'll tell you more about Bill and about all the things I learned." The weeks turned into months. Takeshi found work at a reconstruction crew, helping to rebuild Tokyo one brick at a time. It was hard labor, but it felt purposeful. He was making something instead of destroying it. He was building instead of burning. He saw Americans sometimes, occupation troops patrolling or supervising reconstruction efforts. Some Japanese people spat when they passed. Others just looked away, faces carefully neutral. Takeshi found himself watching them, looking for Bill in every American face, even though he knew the chances were impossible. He never found him. But he did notice other things. He noticed American soldiers giving candy to Japanese children. He noticed them helping old women carry heavy loads. He noticed them looking uncomfortable and out of place, kids far from home trying to figure out how to be conquerors in a country that felt more like a ghost than an enemy. One day in November, Takeshi was working on a building foundation when a young American soldier approached. "Excuse me," the soldier said in broken Japanese. "You speak English?" "Little," Takeshi replied carefully. "Oh, good. My unit is trying to help rebuild the school over there," he pointed. "But we don't know where the water line is. The old blueprints are all burned. Someone said you might know." Takeshi did know. He'd grown up in this neighborhood. He walked the soldier over to the school site and showed him where the water main ran. "Thanks," the soldier said, relieved. "Hey, you seem like a good guy. This your neighborhood?" "Was. Before."
The soldier's face fell. "Oh, man, I'm sorry. This whole thing..." He gestured vaguely at the ruins. "It's all just so messed up, you know?" "Yes," Takeshi said. "Very messed up." "I'm Danny," the soldier said, offering his hand. "From Philadelphia." Takeshi shook it, remembering Bill, remembering that human connection could survive even the aftermath of war. "Takeshi," he said, "from here." They stood there for a moment, a Japanese former pilot and an American soldier, in the ruins of a war neither of them had wanted, trying to rebuild something that looked like a future. "Hey," Danny said suddenly, "you ever have a Coke? Coca-Cola?" Takeshi smiled. "Yes, once. At the end of the war." "It's pretty great, right?" Danny grinned. "We got some back at our supply depot. You want one? I can grab you one." And there it was, the circle completing, the sweetness being shared again, the simple human gesture of offering a drink to someone who needed one. "Yes," Takeshi said. "Thank you. I would like that very much." Danny jogged off toward the American compound, and Takeshi stood in the ruins of his neighborhood with the morning sun warming his face. He thought about Bill in Nebraska, hopefully home with Dorothy and Tommy and Bill Jr. He thought about all the propaganda he'd been fed about American brutality, about demons and devils. He thought about how war makes enemies out of people who might otherwise have been friends. And he thought about Coca-Cola, that strange, sweet, carbonated drink that had become for him a symbol of something larger, the possibility of connection across impossible divides,
The possibility of changing your mind about who the enemy is. The possibility of building something new from the ruins of everything you thought you knew. Danny came back with 2 bottles, frost beating on the glass. "They're cold, too," he said proudly. "We got ice." He opened both bottles and handed one to Takeshi. "To rebuilding," Danny said, raising his bottle. "To the future," Takeshi replied. They drank together in the November sunlight, while around them Tokyo slowly put itself back together, brick by brick, bottle by bottle, human by human. The Coca-Cola tasted exactly how Takeshi remembered. Sweet and sharp and alive. It tasted like the possibility of change. It tasted like hope. That evening, he brought the second Coca-Cola home to Akiko. Her eyes went wide when she saw it. "You got one," she said. "You actually got one." "I promised, didn't I?" They sat on Mrs. Tanaka's front step and shared it, passing the bottle back and forth like a secret. Akiko's first taste made her cough and laugh at the same time. "It's so bubbly and sweet. It's like... She couldn't find the words. "Like something new," Takeshi suggested. "Yes," Akiko said. "Exactly like something new." They finished the bottle together while the sun sat over Tokyo's ruins. And for the first time since the war had ended, Takeshi felt something that might have been peace. Not happiness, not yet. The grief was too fresh, the losses too enormous. But peace. The quiet certainty that life would continue, that sweetness could be found even in bitter times, that yesterday's enemies could become today's friends, that a simple shared drink could change how you understood the whole world. He still kept the original Coca-Cola bottle, the one Bill had given him, the one with Pacific seawater sealed inside. He kept it on a small shelf in the back room where he could see it first thing in the morning and last thing at night. A reminder, a promise, a symbol of the strange journey from hating people he'd never met to understanding that hatred was just another kind of propaganda, and that truth tasted like nothing you'd expect. Truth tasted sweet. Truth tasted fizzy and strange. Truth tasted like Coca-Cola on a hot August day, shared between people who were supposed to be enemies, but chose to be human instead. And that, Takeshi thought, was something worth rebuilding a world around.